Hello and welcome to Pick and Drive Live, the live edition of our weekly podcast where we review and preview the big matches in Australian rugby. I'm your host, Mitch, and with me tonight is regular host, Rev.
G'day.
And we've got a special guest tonight joining us from ABC Sport Canberra and also regular contributor to The Raw, Brett McKay. Brett, how are you this evening?
Yeah, good guys. Thanks for having me on. Looking forward to it.
Awesome. So we normally have Ando, and unfortunately tonight he wasn't able to join us. So bear with us. I am going to be hosting this and driving this thing. So we'll see how we go. Might be a bit bumpy, but we'll get through it. So just a reminder for everyone watching along at home, get involved with your questions, comments, and banter, and we will throw to those questions throughout the broadcast. So what are we going to do tonight? First of all, we will go through the Rugby Championship results from round 3. We will analyse the game on the weekend between the Wallabies and South Africa, the amazing victory that it was. We'll then do a bit of preview for the game coming up this Saturday between the Wallabies and South Africa again, and just chat through some other sort of spicy news that's come up throughout the week. Let me throw this up quickly. Oh, where is it? There we go. Rugby Championship. Get involved with your questions in the comments down the bottom.
Look at that. Smooth.
There we go.
So one thing that has come out recently in the news that's been in the last sort of 24 hours was from the South African coaching camp, and it was at the press conference that was named of the team a few days ago. It is a report around that South Africa is putting together a video similar to what they did with Rassie Erasmus, but they've gone through the right channels this time and sending this on to World Rugby for review. So I don't know if you guys have had a chance yet to read the article that's come out, or what are your thoughts generally around what was included in there if you have?
I'm glad to hear.
Or Brett?
Well, I'm glad to hear that it's not just a private resident with a Springbok shirt on this time. I'm glad that it's gone through the official channels.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, and having sort of read the article and just seen the weekend, I think the big issue from this is just how all these discussions that used to be private are now public. The video that Rassie made obviously was 62 minutes of sort of going through every minute detail, more egregious than what they'd normally sent through. And I think now Jacques Nienaber is clever enough to work out, well, he can still talk about the discussions that he's having without making a video and without getting in trouble. And he's really just doing this to try and flag these issues so that the public are aware of it, the refs are aware of it. He took issue with two main things, which were the scrums and us blocking their chases off box kicks. Two things that South African friends sort of brought up during the game, but again, just watching sort of from the Wallabies perspective, I didn't find anything too egregious. I'm sure both coaches would have found little things that they wanted to sort of pinpoint and make sure the refs are on top of next week. But I think this is more just to try and ruffle more feathers and take away from the players.
And the thing that sits with me around this is, again, they did lose the game. And so there are questions, and we'll throw one of those up in a minute that's already come through. But why did they need to mention this? So they've talked about going through the correct channels, going to World Rugby, talking to the referee coaches. Why do they need to then bring it up in the media and say, yes, we've gone through the channels, we have put together another video? It comes across as quite sooky. So as Christy K5 has said, he's a bit of a sook. And Conrad McIndoe has also asked, do South Africa make videos complaining after they win games? Well, record goes to show no, not so far.
yet to see one.
This one of the things,
just to jump in here. Sorry, Mitch. World Rugby have kind of made a rod for their own back here. This is, how long's it been since Rassie's video came out? They still haven't. There's still been no sanction for him, and so until they make some kind of major statement, which they should have done 3 weeks ago, of course South Africa will keep doing this. Why wouldn't they? They'd be mad not to. And they can say they've put this through the official channels all they want, but they've still put it out in public. So they're still, as you said, Rev, they're still trying to do it officially, but they're still doing it exactly the same way. So what's changed? Nothing.
That's right. And one of the things that jumped out to me in the article was this quote. So we've got a framework that we work with now, which we probably didn't know about before. It's the same framework they use in the Six Nations. And obviously us as South Africa, not playing any rugby before the Georgia test, we weren't 100% sure what the process was. We didn't know what the process was. We do now. So again, that doesn't quite cut it. Surely this process has been around for a little while now, that all test nations, particularly in the top 5 nations of the world, if not, the top 3, would know what the process is.
There wouldn't be a process that's exclusive to the Six Nations. This would just be the process under which all internationals, as sanctioned by World Rugby, are played. Have they just forgotten about everything they've done since 1995? Is that what we're saying?
That's what it seems like, doesn't it? Anyway, I think we'll move on from that and we'll look at some of the results from the weekend. So I'll bring them up now for everyone to have a squiz at. So this was the first time, and I believe it was the first time in history that we've had 2 test matches played at the same time at the same venue. So, no, that's this weekend. Excuse that one. That's for later on. So we had 2 games.
You did warn everyone about a few bumps, so that's fine.
There's so many different buttons to push at the moment. So we had the value
of Ando.
That's right. We had South Africa and Australia play at 8 o'clock on Saturday night, with New Zealand playing Argentina at 5 o'clock. The results were 36-0 to New Zealand for the first game and 28-26 to Australia in the second game. So if we have a quick look now what that means for the table for the Rugby Championship. Let me bring that one up. There we go. And there it is. All right. So we have New Zealand in first place on 15 points with a plus 4 and against of 91 points. South Africa in second space on 10 points with a 4 and against of 37. Australia now in third place with 4 points after our win on the weekend, negative 50 points. And Argentina in fourth place with no points at the moment on negative 78. So I guess, boys, first of all, how did we find having 2 test matches back-to-back at the same venue on the same day?
I'm surprised to hear it's never been done before. I mean, would there not have even been World Cup doubleheaders? Obviously not.
But not at the same venue.
Yeah, right.
In those instances.
There you go. I mean, from a viewer at home point of view, it didn't really change much, did it? It was just 2 games back to back like we've always had, and it didn't even necessarily feel like though, and it was at the same ground even, because it was probably an hour between the end of the first game and the start of the Wallabies test. So it was a funny one, but I think it's proved that it can happen, and we had the discussion on the Raw just last week that are these double headers and mini tournaments maybe the way of the future for the Rugby Championship? Is this something that we could do more of? So yeah, I mean, it was 2 games of rugby back to back. My understanding, and anecdotally, is that ticket prices were actually pretty decent for 2 games of rugby, sort of what you'd expect to pay for 1 test pretty much. So yeah, I would imagine it's the same in Brisbane this weekend, and hopefully people get there in droves.
It'll be interesting to see this weekend, particularly how the ticket sales go, with last weekend being a Sunday afternoon game with the Wallabies kicking off 8 o'clock on a Sunday. That would have affected quite a few families and workers who were going to work on Monday not quite able to make it to the game. I would imagine this weekend there would be a fair few people who were very keen to get there early for that Wallabies game and carry it right on through to the afternoon. Are you planning on getting out there at all, Rev?
I'm getting a early jump start on my anniversary. We're going to Montville for the weekend, so not the best time holiday, I'll admit, but I think just to touch on the doubleheaders, I think last weekend showed that it can work, and this week I think will show that it's going to be fantastic. Gold Coast isn't really renowned for drawing the biggest rugby crowd, so I think that was always going to be a bit of an issue. Factor that in with it being a Sunday, it is really hard to get there at 5, and you wouldn't have left till a bit after 10 o'clock, just based off how that game finished. So I think being a Saturday night at Suncorp, which is obviously the home of rugby in Queensland and arguably Australia, I think that's a really good opportunity. And the fact that the Wallabies won, there's going to be so many fair weather fans that, were questioning what to do on a Saturday night, thinking, actually, we just beat the best team in the world. Let's go out there and see if we can do it again, be part of the party. So I'm really looking forward to this. But as Brett said, this to me just seemed like a standard Friday night or Saturday night during Super Rugby season. You watch your Crusaders versus Blues or something at 5 o'clock, and then Reds versus Brumbies afterwards. It's, so I think it works great at home. I hope it works for people to go to the venue.
At the Gold Coast. Sorry,
yeah, go, Brett.
I've done it again for you.
You're right.
At the Gold Coast on a Sunday, off the back of 3 straight Brett Bledisloe losses. Yeah. It was going to be a pretty hard sell, wasn't it?
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, this weekend there's no other sport in southeast Queensland, so there's nothing else on. So hopefully it is a big crowd.
And I will throw this up for fans who are wondering if they do want to head out. Just so you know, the Wallabies do play at 5 o'clock kickoff. They don't play the 8 o'clock kickoff. So if you are thinking of heading out there, make sure you get there nice and early and don't show up at 8 o'clock expecting to see the Wallabies and realize that it's the All Blacks in Argentina that you've arrived for. Well, why don't we move now into the analysis and our review of the game on the weekend? Did you want to take us through that one, Rev?
Yeah, happy to. So we could very briefly discuss the New Zealand sort of routing of Argentina, 39-0. Didn't make for, pretty viewing. And the sad thing is 7-0 after, I think, 34 or 35 minutes. So Argentina were right in it before it ran away. And we're going to touch on one bit of brilliance in that in a little bit. But really the main focus is our Wallabies versus South Africa because taking on the number one team in the world, still number one team in the world, just beat the Lions, had just won a World Cup as recently as, 2 years ago. All the pressure was on. All the head-to-head matchups said this is a Springboks win and it shouldn't be close. But the Wallabies delivered. Really, led from the front by Quade Cooper, but Michael Hooper doing a great job equaling Gregan's record in that match. Just choosing all the right options, I think, for kicking a goal. They came out with, 8 kicks from 8 from Quade. Even though we only scored 1 try, I just think all the attacking play that we were doing was really quite inventive as well. Just so much to like. I mean, we beat 21 defenders. We only missed 5 tackles. When we look at our 6 line breaks to 0, their stats that really do look good in a sense that we controlled every part of the game. And it's something that you can say very rarely about Wallabies performances in that they seem that polished. Brett, I'll throw to you. What were some of your takeaways from that game that just did seem like a win against all odds?
Like the main takeaway for me was that despite everything that you've just said there, I thought there was still plenty of improvement in them. That there was still, the attack was good, but it was still clunky at times. You can see that particularly in the backs, and it's unsurprisingly given the personnel involved now, that there's not a lot of combination there. Samu Kerevi and Lenny Katau obviously haven't played together until a week ago, and there's very little combination there. I think Ikitau only ran it once for the night, which I've mentioned during the week on the Raw. Kerevi's never been a big distributor, and when he does finally bring that linking game into his arsenal, he could be the best 12 in the world by a long, long way. It's great that Andrew Kellaway and particularly got involved and started looking for the ball, but they shouldn't have to, I guess, is the point in all that. So as good as the attack was, and you're right, 6 line breaks, there was however many defenders beaten it was, South Africa missed 20 odd tackles. It still looked like it could be a lot better. And I'm sure this week they'll know they've got to step it up because I'll be stunned if the Box miss 20 missed tackles again.
Yeah. And Mitch, we did mention Quade a bit there, and also like the brilliance of Samu Kerevi. Were there other players that stood out to you or that you liked sort of seeing throughout that match?
Yeah, I mean, you can't go past Quade. You need to talk about him to start off with, and we did speak a little bit about him in the podcast earlier this week. But I really thought that Quade being there really calmed the backline down a lot and really just seemed to give them a good presence of leadership in the backline that we've probably been missing for the last few weeks. And he made the right choices in terms of when it was the right time to take on the line or to play it out to Samu or to chip it over the top, which is something that Noah's been struggling with in the last few weeks, is just sort of, I think, having that confidence to know what to do at the right time. But outside of that, Andrew Kellaway scoring another try. He seems to be getting better and better every test match, and he just seems to pop up in all the right spots, all the right times. He's really starting to take some of Corabetti's shine at the moment, because as keen as Corabetti is to want to get over the line, it seems that Andrew Kellaway is the one that's actually doing it at the moment.
He's genuinely one of the better finishers in comfortably in Australia, but I would say in Southern Hemisphere rugby. He knows where the line is. He knows how to get there. I mean, he stepped off his right to come back infield and beat at least 2 or 3 guys, I think, to cross the line. It was a really, really good finish. We haven't mentioned the forwards, and we need to, because they were excellent. The set piece was superb all night. Valentini, Swinton, Rodder, Phillip got through a mountain of work in defence and at the breakdown, and then to see James Slipper, particularly at the end, giving it to the Springbok front row, winning a couple of crucial penalties. It was just a really, really strong forwards performance, and we've not been able to say that about the Wallabies against the Boks for many years.
That's right. Just throwing this one out to Christy K, who said Andrew Kellaway 2021 Joe Roth, which is a big rap.
High praise.
Very high praise. It's that sort of finishing, though, isn't it? It's quality. He just knows how to get there.
And I think it's something we mentioned sort of during the French series as well. Despite not being as big or maybe as direct as Corabetti, he's got this real knack for knowing exactly where to be. He's probably the smartest back we've got in that back line at the moment, just in terms of he knows he doesn't need to make every line break. He's going to be off the shoulder or in support. Like that try he scored that I think Banks tried to offload, and he sort of regathered off French hands like all the while back. It was just brilliant. I don't know how many other players sort of do that sort of thing. And while we're mentioning, we might put up that clip of his try just to unpack a little bit, because there were some great things throughout that game that we want to dive into. It looks like we're getting the back end of that here, where he's...
Yeah, we are. It's a GIF, so it will cycle through, so we're just going to have to watch him putting the ball down, but we can do that all night long.
And that's what we want to talk about. It's just the dive technique. It's all about grounding. It's not about the build-up. But no, I think one of the things I wanted to talk about with this, and the good thing with the extra bit of time while that GIF sort of loads, is this started off the back of the Sia Khaleesi yellow card. And one of the things, and I don't know how well planned this was, but I think these guys have done their research, and Hooper in particular, off every defensive line out since the start of the year and before that, Sia Khaleesi is defended in that sort of 10 and 12 channel. He's sort of assisting Pollard and Diolende as a bit of a striker. He's going to race up and make that big hit so that they're sort of cleaning up the crumbs if they need to. And with him off, that was just the piece that was missing. And they really exploited that with really quick turning around of the ball off the lineouts, and something they did all night. Fainga would go into sort of, Lull and Benumbi into the lineout. Hooper was constantly grabbing that, giving the pass to White and McDermott, and just trying to get that ball out as quickly as possible. It didn't give the backs any chance to sort of assemble for the box. And to me, that set up this whole play. I know it was several phases later that the ball gets out to Kellaway, but I was so impressed with how well they read the situation, and what a step up that seems to have been from the previous weeks where we haven't really used the one-man advantage very well. This week, we sucked in the numbers. We knew get some direct lines from Karevi, spread the ball wide. None of the passes were overly short. And when it finally gets back to Cooper and he's got this great depth, he can give it to Karevi. All he has to do is beat Faf de Klerk in a one-on-one, and he's set up the only try of the night for us. But what a fantastic try it was.
And it's the playmaking of Cooper, isn't it? He lined Karevi up at Faf de Klerk and gave him a one-on-one. And the chance was there because Pollard was there in the backfield. We've just seen it there in the vision. And I think the best part of this now, we can sort of see it there in that little bit of vision. There's actually 4 other Wallabies infield of Kellaway in support. So, if he's not making the line, because I think it's Mapimpi is back there, there's 4 other blokes that can score that. We can see it really perfectly head on there. That's Folau Fainga running a really good support line on the inside, but then you've got Angus Bell and Lockie Swinton and one other. It's Tate McDermott, isn't it? Just coming into field there, all ready to take that. And again, we haven't seen a lot of that in recent years. The ability of the Wallabies, the average Wallaby player, to present in the right spot to take an offload like that or to support a line break hasn't always been there, and that was really good to see, because that's what the 17th minute. So that's a really, really good sign.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we spoke about last week on this same segment, was when we make those line breaks, our game players don't seem to be confident in space or don't make the right decisions. We were looking last week at some clips of Banks who made that line break and then got bundled into touch when he probably needed to put it on the toe. And another clip of Korobetti getting that break from Samu Karevi through that first try that was disallowed. But when he got into space, there was no one there for him to actually offload to. So like you just said there, Brett, we've got 4 options there for that offload. So again, maybe that comes from playing the Springboks, a little bit more confidence than playing the All Blacks, but this team just seemed to really want it this week.
We've just seen it perfectly there on that angle. It's just shown that the pass from Cooper to Karevi got him outside Lukhanyo Am, who'd shot straight up, and that puts him on a one-on-one with Faf de Klerk. And Faf's he's a pretty tough defender, but he was no chance in that particular situation. So they finished it really well.
And it does seem funny, this isn't one of the areas we were specifically going to target, but even 75th minute where we get that sort of Michael Hooper break where he links up with Reece Hodge towards the end of the match. Again, that was isolating.
Just a still photo as well we've got of when
that
Cooper gets the ball.
So if you look at that, and I'm pointing to my screen now, that's obviously no help, but I think it's about this come up. He's the bloke straight on in front of Cooper there now, and it's Lukhanyo Am off his left shoulder. So there's 2 really good decoy runners in front of Karevi there, but the pass puts the ball out and puts Karevi outside Lukhanyo Am. That's where the one-on-one comes, and I questioned the pass out to Kellaway at the time. I wondered whether they might have sent it upstairs because I think describing it as flat is a bit generous. But it was just really, really good play, and that's not taking anything away from anything Noel Alessio has done over the last 6 tests against France and the All Blacks. But this is what experience brings. This is the difference.
Exactly. Yep.
And I think South Africa would have done their research, because this picture, if it's Noel Alessio at the helm, it does look like the crossfield kick is an option. And that's sort of been the way that he has taken that. You can see all that space between Kellaway and Leroux all the way back there. That looks primed for a kick, but that's exactly what the box would want you to do. And so I think this picture, you can nearly hang it up somewhere in the Louvre. It does really show what a great job they've done of just piecing all the spots exactly where they want and utilising that one-man overlap.
And so you remember last week that Lolosio did play that crossfield kick to Kellaway. It was on penalty advantage, admittedly, but he did play that crossfield kick, and Kellaway was saying, "What are you doing? That was the chance to put it through the hands." And so
And this is a comment from Steve Lenthal, straight for you, Brett. They call that pass to Kellaway aggressively flat.
Yeah, I think Steve made that point to me at the time, funnily enough.
Mitch, did you want to go through the Matt Phillip yellow card, or were you going through the scrums?
I'll chuck that up now. So while I'm getting this ready, one of the things that's come in from Hugh Tyndall is a question there. I'll let you boys chat that through while I get this ready.
And he's spot on, isn't he? It was the forwards absolutely had parity, and that was the Boks were able to play that game against the Lions through that series. They were just able to bash them up through the middle, but they didn't have the same success. They didn't carry anywhere near as well, surprisingly so, against the Wallabies defence. And when the Wallabies did carry straight back at them, they played a really direct game on Sunday night. Suddenly there were dents and there were missed tackles and there were clean breaks, and no doubt it became a bit of a downward spiral of pressure on their defensive line.
Yeah, one of the things that seemed to strike me with that, and just upon sort of rewatching it again without the sort of stress or the emotion of wondering how we'd go, was seeing that so many of our passes were actually wider than what the British and Irish Lions were contraring. They were doing a lot of those short sort of pop passes. A lot of our passes did seem to be at least sort of 5 meters, and while it's not a massive difference, it was just trying to make it more of a group tackle into really just a one-on-one, trying to isolate defenders, and really such a small difference, but something that did seem to work in the Wallabies' favours, given they definitely didn't have the size advantage leading into it.
All right, here we go. I've got it up now. So one of the things I wanted to chat through with this one particularly was just the maul defense and the technicalities around this yellow card and how hard it is for teams to actually stop a maul. So the Boks go up, they come down. Phillip has come through the middle of that maul there, and he's come back around the back there and seized on the ball. So the maul then gets collapsed here, goes to ground, and he gets pinged for collapsing that.
Mm.
Now, Brett, you're probably a little bit more experienced in the maul department, being a Brumbies fan, than I am. My initial thoughts around this are that how can you collapse or pull down a maul if you're the player on top? Like if you've come around and grabbed the top of it.
Yeah, it's all about the picture you present, and the context in that is that Australia had already been warned and penalised at least once before that for driving early in the line out. So Luke Pearce has already put them on notice. He's already inadvertently, subconsciously, he's looking for the Wallabies to do something wrong here. And unfortunately, right at that point there now, Matt Phillip ends up on the ground and he's pulling down. So, if he was around the ball and the ball carrier and he sort of rode him to ground, and that's the picture he was able to present, then it's probably play on. The Wallabies have sacked it properly. But unfortunately, because he's lost his footing or whatever he's done, he's ended up on the ground himself pulling down. The picture's pretty clear there to Luke Phillip. And having just warned them and just penalised them, he had to go to the pocket, unfortunately. I don't think there's too much trouble arguing with that one. It's the way he emerged back on the ball is not unlike how Darcy Swain finished up one of the French tests. It might have been the first test or the third test. I can't remember. He suddenly he was speared off, and then suddenly he was back in it, and then suddenly he was on the ball. Yeah. And in that occasion, he grabbed the ball, just rode it down, and that was it. It was again the picture he presented.
So I guess in this instance, what can players do legally to stop a maul like that?
Gee, you could get a lot of money if you got the answer.
yeah. If I could answer that, it would be a highly paid coaching consultant, wouldn't we? It's realistically, I guess I'd say the same thing. If you can present the right picture, you can get away with it. But the fact that they were already on warning, they'd already been penalised, realistically, unless South Africa score there's probably a penalty coming. That's just the way the game and the way the driving maul in attacking zones like that seems to be officiated these days. And whether it's right or wrong, that seems to be the way it's done. And you could say that about pretty much every line out drive 5 meters out.
I love Hooper's little involvement here, which potentially stops the try being scored, because Faf de Klerk's at the back scrambling to try and get his hands on the ball, and Hooper just sits there and he just puts his arms up like I'm not in the way, and then Faf ends up having to take him out to the side. It's brilliant.
Of which Hooper then grabbed hold of him and kept pulling him to make sure that he was out.
Take him to ground as well. Yeah, so it completely takes him out of the play. So Ball Productions has said Phillip comes from behind, puts his weight on it, look at his body position. I think right call. I do have one photo. Yeah,
that's probably what contributes to him. That's probably what contributes to him losing his footing too. And as soon as he was ending up on the ground like that, it's going to look like you're trying to collapse them all every day.
So do we have one potential?
Yeah.
So that player on the ground there is actually Folau Fainga. So I'm wondering if it's actually Folau Fainga who ends up pulling the maul down, because at this instance, Phillip's still on his feet just in front of Hooper. It's Folau Fainga that ends up on the ground and they trip over him and end up going to ground. So we potentially could have seen a red card on the weekend with Folau Fainga getting that second yellow in the second half. But sliding door moments, let's be happy that didn't happen.
Yeah.
Probably fair to say then that maybe the way Matt Phillip ended up back on the ball wasn't entirely legal anyway, and that's why he got pinged.
Yeah. The challenge now is, I think, because Matthew Carley is going to be the referee this weekend, and just being an Englishman, as Luke Pearce is, they've obviously done a lot of the same competitions, so they're probably going to have at least a similar style of play they're used to. I think for him, having the picture of, the Springboks scored all 3 of their tries from rolling mauls. The Wallabies didn't have much of an answer to it other than sort of infringing and sort of driving early. It's going to be a tough ask, I think, for McKellar to come up with a solution to that in the 6 days of just, how can we actually stop them legally? And I'm very keen to see, as we discuss the team, how those changes might actually be able to help. And I think we've already mentioned some of the players, so I'm keen to dive into the team if you guys
I just wanted to chuck up the clips of us getting some. We spoke about it before, so the scrum dominance that in key pivotal points, which were very important for us this week. So this is right on halftime. 16-11 is the score at the moment. South Africa's feed, and we just absolutely demolished their scrum, turn it over, get a penalty, which we end up converting. So we go up halftime 19 to 11 with an 8-point buffer, which is massive, particularly for a player like Angus Bell, who's very pivotal in that position. Then similar, I'll just throw up as well before we move off, because I am conscious of the time, is the scrum up full time as well. Yeah. And you can say what you can keep going, Brett. Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, you could see in that previous one, it was Alatoa and Faenga, just their second shove away to the right, just speared Kitchoff off effectively, popped up their front row as well, their hooker as well, and just superb scrum, like 5 meters out from the defensive line. What was it, 15 seconds before half time? The slipper was superb in that last 10 minutes. This is the last scrum of the game, isn't it? And again, they've got that shove away. I know South Africa will be saying something about Taniela Tupou's angling in, but such as his power that he just goes for that gap between tight head and hooker, and it looks like he is angling in because that's the impact that he has through there. But Slipper did a fantastic job there as well.
Well, the reason as well that they're not getting pulled up is Australia is the dominant scrum there. We've gone forward, they've gone backwards 2 meters. So to then start claiming that they've been hard done by, you probably need to win your own hit and then put pressure on to get the penalty in your favour. But also, this penalty here isn't actually for the scrum. The scrum, it was play on from the base of that scrum, and it was the turnover from Nick White that really ended up sealing the game for us.
That's Nick White winning a breakdown pilfer penalty. He'll be framing that still shot.
He'll be hanging that over Hooper for the rest of his life.
Speaking of Nick White, let's dive into the team previews, because we've seen the team list, and I think Nick White's obviously one to talk about with his inclusion.
We want to do South Africa or Australia first?
Oh, I'm easy either way, whichever one comes up.
Let me get those up for you. Keep talking.
Well, they didn't make too many changes from memory, did they? The box?
No, both teams really similar from last week, which is nice. I think gives all senses to the players that they know that they can do better. I think that's probably going to be the message from Ninaba is, they're a championship team. They just need to show that they can do that, so they're given another chance. We'll go through the team. One of the changes first up is Trevor Niakane coming in at loosehead prop. He's partnered again by Bongi Banambi and Franz Malherba. Ebenezer Beth's at lock again, but this time partnered by Marvin Ori, who comes in for the injured Luta Yaga. And then they return the same back row of Sia Khaleesi, Franco Mostert, and Dwayne Vermeulen. And then an unchanged backline as well, which is nice to see because these guys, when they get going, are just absolutely rapid, and they obviously didn't get much of a chance to run with the ball. So we're going to see De Klerk, Pollard, Mapimpi, Dialende, Am, and Kosi, and LaRue. Not much change on the bench. The only difference is Oxenshade drops out of the 23 completely, and Stephen Kitchoff takes his place at loosehead prop on the bench. That's going to be a massive challenge for the Wallabies, I think, just having a prop of his caliber coming off. But I mean, there's not really a bad front row that they can name. So a very interesting challenge. And I think when we look at the Wallabies team, that decision becomes even more vital, because this will be the first test ever under Rennie without Alan Alatoa. So it's going to be a very interesting.
Right?
Yeah. Up to this point, all games have had Taniela Tupou and Alan Alatoa as the two tight heads. So this is a whole heap of pressure on young Tom Robertson. But just as we get to the starting team for the Wallabies, Slipper comes in at loose. We got Folau Fainga and Taniela Tupou in the front row. So nice reward for Tupou to get his start. Isaac Rodder and Phillip retain their spots with Lockie Swinton, Michael Hooper, and Rob Valentini in the back row again. Nick White jumps into the starting team. Really, I think, can we say squarely off the back of his 50-22, either that or his throwing of the mouth guard when there was the LaRue knockdown.
Or the turnover and the full time.
I mean, he's just done so much. He's deserved the spot. But, I mean, either him or McDermott could start, you'd be happy. He's partnered by the same back line. Quade Cooper at 10, Marika Corambetti 11, Samu Karevi and Lenny Katau keeping their centre partnership going, with Andrew Kellaway at 14 and Tom Banks at 15. There is a little change to the bench. It's good to see Kaitu keep his spot. Angus Bell drops back to reserve. Tom Robertson gets his first test cap opportunity since 2018. Very interesting. He's going to be playing the tight head position if he gets on, it seems, just based off numbering. Darcy Swain comes back in after 1 week off with injury, and then the same bench of Samu, McDermott. Oh, sorry, McDermott's changed in, but the same bench of Samu, Hodge, and Pataya joining that lot. A lot to unpack with that lot, and just as we mentioned, Kitchell coming off the bench, I think for him to be coming up against Tom Robertson, who hasn't played a test since 2018, in his 73 professional games or whatever, actually, it's even more. I think his 80 professional games between Waratahs, Force, and Wallabies, he's only started at tight head once.
Yeah.
It's really not his bread and butter. I know he can play both sides to some degree, and he's gone off the bench and done a pretty good job at tight head at super level and a few tests back in 2017. But this is a massive step up. So, I mean, I've just been talking names for what seems like 5 minutes. Brett, are there any changes here that you do see as slight areas of concern, or for the most part, the Wallabies have named a good side?
No, I'm with you in that I'm glad he's minimised the changes. I think White makes sense. I think the impact he's been making off the bench has just been getting better and better each time, and I think it was pretty clear last week that McDermott wasn't 100% fit by halftime, and that was a good change at halftime. So obviously the shin injury for McDermott isn't so bad that he can't play, but I wouldn't be surprised if White played 60 or 70 minutes this week. Realistically, McDermott's played every game I think so far, albeit Gordon started the first 2 tests against France. Robertson coming off the bench at tight head gives you an idea of how scant, I suppose, the troops are getting, because Alatoa going back to Canberra for the birth of a child. Obviously Tupou starts, but now you realise why suddenly Greg Holmes was in the Wallaby squad and not just with a coaching clipboard in hand. He had to bring the boots as well, because a combination of injuries and unavailability and border closures, particularly, that's really had an impact there. It's the same reason that suddenly Sean McMahon's in there. It's the same reason why Liam Wright was added the other week as well. They're basically adding who they can, where they can, and where they can get them. So it'll be a huge chance. Robertson, I've got a memory, the Waratahs tried to switch him to tight head, and he did play off the bench as a tight head for a bit. But yeah, I think loose head's been his preferred and better position. His scrummaging at loose head for the Force this year has been fantastic all season. So it's a big ask for him coming on against who it'll be Kitchoff later in the game as well. So it'll be really, really interesting there. Swain back is interesting. He's obviously got over his injury, because I thought Rob Leota was excellent last week, and he's made a really good fist of lock this year, being a back rower himself. But he quickly became the sort of number one lock for the Rebels this year, didn't he? And otherwise it's all pretty. I think it all sort of makes sense. Bell was great last week, but that obviously was about managing Slipper's minutes, I think it's 2. So it all looks pretty good to me, I think.
Is this the most Western Force players in a 23 for the last 5 years?
Well, one. Well, 2, I suppose.
Well, 2, Robinson and Rodder.
Yeah,
true. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, well,
Rodder gets it on the colours, but it's a fair point.
I'll claim him.
Yeah. I mean, we've probably got to add the caveat that 2 of those 5 years that you're putting into the equation there, Mitch, they weren't in the competition.
They didn't exist. That's right.
Point stands.
Don't
though.
tell any Force fans that.
Yeah,
What are the thoughts around James O'Connor?
Well, yeah,
I don't mind. Yeah, I actually don't mind that they've left him out. I don't think it matters that he's regaining fitness on the training track. And with all respect to them, I think Argentina is the time to ease him back into Test rugby. I think they will be wanting to try and finish the that we want to finish the job against South Africa. They've never won 2 tests in a row under Dave Rennie as well. So there's a real opportunity for them this week.
And
that's one
Conrad
of the big
McIndoe's just
challenges.
thrown in as well. Sorry, I'll get back to you in a sec, Rev. Just maybe Tupou play 70 or something like he does for the Reds this week.
Yeah, if he can, there's a chance. But the South African front row might have something to say about that too. And if they can get their strong carrying game and force Tupou to make a lot of upfront tackles, then they'll tire him out and they'll force the change earlier. So I guess it's up to the box ball carriers and set pieces as to how long Tupou plays.
Yeah. I'm just glad that Tupou got mentioned again, because the one thing that I sort of thought might happen coming into the weekend, I still kind of wish they had done, was we saw during the Super Rugby season that when Alan Alonso had his red card, James Slipper jumped across for 2 of those games at tight head. And I think just in the event of trying to get the best players out of the field and that have had that recent experience, we've got Scott Seo sort of waiting in the wings, who's fit and healthy. I think you could have had Bell and Seo as your loose heads and Tupou starting at tight and Slipper coming off the bench. And at least that way you're getting someone that's played a whole heap of recent tests. He's played some recent games at tight head as well, just coming off the bench, because we knew they were going to have a strong set piece to contest with anyway. So, look, it's a massive challenge for Tom Robertson, but I think he's shown that he can match it at super level. So I'm very keen to see him get given the chance, because he very quietly accrued this will be his 25th cap. So that's a decent amount of numbers. That's sort of in that sort of 20 to 30 cap range that, we're sort of hoping that most of our players get to.
And that's one thing I've been quite impressed with Dave Rennie in terms of him knowing when players are ready for test to bring into the test arena. Some of the younger guys, but also some of the older guys coming back. So he doesn't seem like he's going to put players in there that aren't quite ready and aren't going to fit his game plan and his game style and get the job done for him. We've already seen that with introducing, I was skeptical about bringing in Leota and Kaitu last week, just wondering how long they've been in camp and taking that next step. But they both didn't look out of place in the Wallabies. So he's clearly got an idea of what they're contributing on the training paddock, and Robinson obviously is doing enough to get that call up this week, which is good to see.
Neither would have played a game in 3 months, would they?
No.
Well, they had an unofficial hit out the week before, 2 weeks ago against the Western Force. But outside of that, yes, it's been a long time on the training paddock.
Yeah, it makes the performances all about it. And Kaitu was excellent. He's a good scrummager. He's got the combination with Robertson up front as well, and he's good around the ground. He knows how to hit a ruck. He's one of those modern hookers who's a would-be 7 almost.
And that's kind of what we've been missing. I like one of the things you brought up. I think it must have been in I think it was your article for ABC last night, Brett, but just talking about how that hooker jersey, it's really only had the 2 starters this whole time. It's really been a fight between BPA and Feinger, and there has been that use of Willassi, Kaitu, Lonergan, all off the bench, and they still really haven't found quite the right mix there. And I do find it sort of interesting, and I'm keen to hear your thoughts on hooker, but also fullback. They were sort of highlighted early on as the 2 positions we didn't necessarily have a standout. But yet it seems that he's really persisted with BPA and Feinger as its starters, and Tom Banks is the only player other than Hooper who's started every test this year under Rennie. So it's it does seem like he's really just trying to develop them into the players that we're sort of hoping they'll be, as opposed to just trying every answer and hoping that one of them just happens to be that. So are you sort of in agreement with that method of just persevering with Feinger and Banks for the time being?
We'll talk about hooker for a minute. I was actually a little bit surprised that he's only used 5 hookers in 2 seasons now. I actually expected the number might have been a bit higher than that, because for the very reason you say, it sort of feels like he hadn't quite made up his mind there. But then you realise when you look through the teams that Pangra started a lot of games last year, has started a lot of games this year as well. It's been the number 16 jersey is where the tweaks have come. So he's trying to find. It's obviously it's building depth. There's a bit of competition there. They know that Lachlan Lonergan is going to be pretty handy in the future. I think these tests are a bit of an opportunity for Folau Fainga to prove his worth going forward, because they know there's some guys in the background floating there. They've had a look at Connell McInerney before. We know Alex Murphy's been in the mix as well. There's Tom Horton at the Waratahs when he's fit there as well.
As well.
Yeah, exactly right. He's been in the mix there. So it feels like there's been a lot of change, but there actually hasn't been a lot of different players used. So that's an interesting. Banks, I think, is an interesting one. He's a potentially unpopular opinion, but I don't think he's been anywhere near as bad as what is being made out. He spilled a couple of balls early on last week, but other than that, he actually adjusted pretty well and was pretty safe under the high ball. And I'm not entirely convinced that Reece Hodge, for example, is going to be any better under the South African kick than Banks is. And the ability to bust a tackle and accelerate into space is part of Banks' game that I don't think Hodge has. Whether O'Connor can bring that sort of thing, if he gets tried there in the next few weeks, we'll find out, I suppose. But for the moment, I think Banks has performed pretty consistently. Sure, we'd love him to do a bit more, maybe, but I actually think he's been pretty consistent. And the fact that Rennie hasn't made the change there perhaps tells you that the alternates really aren't as strong as we think they are.
Yep. And that's the one thing that's, I think, hardest for everyone on the sidelines and sitting at home to take into consideration, is that Rennie probably knows a little bit more than us. And I'm not saying he definitely does, but he might know more than us just based off his proximity. So I will throw it out there, because I know, just seeing social media, when Banks didn't kick it out, everyone was calling for his head, saying Hodge needs to replace him. And then at the end of the match over the weekend, when Hodge does that aerial kick, 79 minutes in, straight to no one, everyone's saying, he should never be in the 23 again. And the same people saying that he should be the 15. So it's one bad decision can really sort of ruin that bit. I recognise we're already going over time, because you don't have sort of Ando cutting in and telling us to stop. So
that's right.
Mitch,
let's move on to our predictions for this game. So we'll start with you, Brett. What's your prediction for the game on the weekend? How do you see it going?
Well, the Wallabies only have to win by 1, don't they? At this time of year, if they can win by 8, then that stops South Africa getting a bonus point, so that'd be handy. Look, I'd love them to go on and finish the job, because there's been so many instances over the last the last 2 seasons, and even beyond that. This certainly isn't a phenomenon that's isolated to Dave Rennie's reign as the Wallabies coach. They just haven't been able to string wins together. And I mentioned before, they've never won consecutive tests under Dave Rennie. So this is a real opportunity to do it. And beating the South Africans, the current world champions, twice in a row would be a massive statement of not just intent, but I think it would be a bit of recognition of quality, because there's certainly a train of thought out there that the Wallabies aren't that crash hot, and they've given reason for that. They've given ammunition for that train of thought. But I think anyone that's watched them reasonably closely over the last few months can see that there's actually some pretty good rugby being played there, and if they can find a method that works for them, then they're going to be challenging. If they keep winning like this, all of a sudden they're in touching distance of Ireland in number 4 on the rankings. South Africa have had their lead at the top halved over New Zealand, so there's change afoot potentially here, and I think there's the chance for the Wallabies to really make a statement over the rest of the Rugby Championship and the Spring Tour as well. So I hope it starts this weekend. I hope they win and put in another performance, better than last weekend, because it'll be absolutely phenomenal if they can.
I think I read somewhere the other day that if we win on the weekend against South Africa and they go on to lose against New Zealand will take first and we'll go into third. That's what in the world rankings.
I don't proclaim to know how the rankings work, but that wouldn't surprise me at all. I'm sure I've heard of a scenario where the Wallabies could finish the Rugby Championship as high as or maybe by the spring tour they could be as high as third even. So I'll absolutely stand corrected if that's not right. But
no one can
it gives you an idea of and it gives you an idea of how tight things are. That between who's third currently? Must be England.
England third.
Yeah, I think between England in third and wherever Wales are now, are they about seventh? There's not
seventh or eighth.
Yeah, there's not much. They're all in the low 80s in terms of rankings points. So it'd be a huge result if the Wallabies can win this week. Let's hope they do.
Yeah. So what did you say? What was your pick? You got to put it down. Wallabies by...
I said by 1, and then I said by 8. So either or, I don't mind.
In there, I'll go Wallabies by 3. I think they're going to be up for it. We've got a good record at Suncorp. It's been I think 9 tests on the trot now, so we'll keep that going. Not a lot of changes for both sides. I expect South Africa to play fairly similarly to what they did this weekend. Maybe take some advantages around. Or tune up some of their kicking and not make as many mistakes, but this team's shown that we can match it against them. So Wallabies by 3.
Jeez, you're making me be the pessimist on this, and I'm the Queenslander. I should be really backing the Suncorp victory. I do agree with something that got brought up right at the start, which was that this wasn't the Wallabies at their best. They've still got room for improvement. And I agree with that. I was watching that and thinking, there were moments here where we could have done little bits differently. But at the same time, I was watching thinking, gee, the Springboks left a lot of points out there. Lacanio Am sort of knocking that on over the line. I think it was 10 points through kicks. There are a few opportunities where I just thought, Nkosi and Mapimpi are getting up under the ball. If it gets out to them a little bit smoother, it's just a bit more dangerous. I do really think the Wallabies can impress. And I think last week I said Springboks by 18 because I thought we didn't stand a chance. This week, I still can't bring myself to say that we're better player for player looking at their team. So I think it's Springboks, but I'm going to say by 6.
Okay.
And that is all head talking. Like internally, I'm screaming at myself saying, what are you talking about? We'll lose by 20. We can do it. But I'll dial that back for a bit just to say I still think, this is the big test. We beat them last week. It's all about how we back up. I'd love 2 consecutive wins because that does really build in nicely to the end of the year too.
We'll quickly run through some of the comments from them. So we've got Ball Productions who says Box by 8. Conrad McIndoe's gone Wallabies by 12. We have Hugh Tyndall who said Box by 1. And then Tim Foster said Wallabies by 2.
Yeah,
Hugh Tyndall also
I don't do much
says
in this.
Yeah,
Wallabies seem to love close finishes. My heart doesn't. I think we're all sitting there in agreement with that.
Yeah, I know that feeling. The Box haven't ever won at Suncorp. Am I right in saying that?
Oh, I thought
it's not
they
been
had
for a while. If they have,
it's
been for a long while.
Again, I'll stand corrected, but their record. I mean, their record in Australia isn't great, but their record in Brisbane, like plenty of good teams, isn't great either.
Oh, how much would we love a 49-0? What was that, 2006, I think? Just where we absolutely ran rampant. I mean, if that happens, just chalk us up as 2023 champions. There's no point having the World Cup.
Give us the trophy now. Just give it to us.
We've saved all the bold calls for far too late. If you've stuck with us for now, you're hearing the madness come to fruition. But look, I'm liking all the positivity. Obviously, the comments are a lot more positive and optimistic than I am. So I'm hoping you guys are on the money because I definitely won't be bragging about an accurate prediction if that ends up being the case.
One last point.
The Rayburn Shield comment there is interesting. That's the mythical shield that's tracked its way all the way back to the start of rugby. And I sort of knew who had it there for a few years, but I have to admit I'd lost track of it until last weekend and then discovered that the Wallabies actually have won the mythical shield off South Africa. So
that's right. We are the current holders of the Rayburn Shield. So we will take that and we will run with it and we will hold it again this weekend. You heard it here first.
Nice.
Well, I think we should wrap things up. So thank you so much, Brett, for your time tonight. We've had one final comment come in from NRC Sydney who said, it's so great to hear Brett back and he misses the old days of the NRC season previews. So we're all hoping that we can get some form of NRC back in the next few years, even faster, hopefully.
Yeah, well, and I think this time of year shows that something is needed. And I saw, and I can't think where I've seen it. I don't know if it was on socials or if it's in an online comment somewhere. But the point was made that New Zealand rugby professionally will play something like 130 or 160 games in the back half of this year. Australia will play 13.
That's right.
And that's crazy. They're all test matches, obviously. So yeah, we definitely need some sort of, semi-professional, whatever it is. We need some sort of competition back at this end of the year. And it's probably for another night. I still maintain that the cheapest, easiest, quickest, most logical, least offensive way to do it is to move Super Rugby AU to this back end of the year and play it as a 5 or a 6 team competition if you could bring Fiji in. It's easy. The players are contracted. The structures are there. I know the states have talked about it. I know the CEOs have talked about it. Let's just hope that that something comes of it.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for the time tonight. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you all next week.
Love it. See you guys.